stardom for riders from Northern and Central Europe. Yesterday we kicked off the 2024 season at the TT circuit of Assen, a season which will be decided over 7 rounds and 14 races at 5 different circuits, concluding in early September at the Nürburgring. Race 1 featured mixed conditions, a mid-race red flag for that crash you just saw on your screen, and eventually a 5-lap sprint to determine the first leader of the 2024 NTC. 4 riders remained in contention until the final sector, with France's Antoine Nativi sensationally defending his lead going into the last chicane and picking up his first win in the Cup ahead of T.S. Wenzel and Jurien van Krugden. That was yesterday. The 14-lap race awaits today, the second of 4 scheduled at the Cathedral of Speed on this year's calendar, who will leave round 1 with an advantage in the standings. Well, join us to find out. It's a Northern Talent Cup. Good afternoon for the Netherlands for race 2 of the Northern Talent Cup. The Pirelli Dutch round comes to an end at the TT circuit Assen after 3 Superbike races, 2 Supersport races, 2 Supersport 300 races, 2 Yamaha R3 Cup races, and finally a second Northern Talent Cup race. The first one of the Honda and Pirelli era yesterday gave us a new race winner and a 4-way battle for the win. Ahead of race 2, excitement is guaranteed and predictions are welcome, although probably unwise given the conditions. Anthony Nelson and Steve English live trackside for the Northern Talent Cup. And Steve, this is a very, very different prospect compared to yesterday, as all sort of races in these sort of conditions. I was really hoping, given the day that we had and the blue skies that we came to this morning, that we might just have a fully dry race here. But it came in the last hour and here we are again.
Yeah, we've got wet conditions here once again. We were after having a super sport race affected by it just as the bike started the race, and it's left us with damp conditions out in the racetrack. But we'll see what the Northern Talent Cup riders face as they make their way around their sighting lap. But it is going to be challenging, tricky conditions for them out there.
See, all these riders are coming through for a second sighting lap. A couple of riders have actually gone straight to the grid. It's the same thing that they did yesterday. A lot of the riders opting to just take 1 second sighting lap around to assess the conditions and know what sort of setup they and their team need to work on. In fact, all the riders will be on the same tyres, no tyre strategies for the teams in the Northern Talent Cup, but there is still a lot of things to assess, a lot of things to look at in the few minutes that they will have on the grid.
Yeah, the good news is that usually there's a delay or an issue when you're moving from dry conditions to wet conditions. This will be declared a wet weather race, and that means that you start the race on wet tyres and then it's up to you to make them survive.
So we'll see what these riders opt to and who can get a good start. Yesterday when we saw the 2 Kiefer Racing riders, it was in similar conditions to this, how we started the original race 1, and they were the riders who were immediately at the front from first and second on the grid, brave as you like, without anybody ahead of them.
A pretty significant dry line developing around certain sections of this racetrack as well. We've seen it this week where the track dries super quickly here in Assen. When the wind starts to blow, and it is blowing again for us, that really does help to dry this circuit very well. This is the run down in towards turn 9, and you can see there's a lot of grey patches on the racetrack compared to the black damp patches.
So that man on your screen, Antoine Nativi, the first French rider to race in Northern Talent Cup. He was Rookie of the Year last season, finishing 6th in the standings and with a couple of podiums to his name. He took his first win yesterday with a 4-way battle, as I mentioned in introduction to this program. He actually led into the final lap and into the final sector, which a lot of times isn't quite the wise strategy to have this TT circuit Assen, but he held his own going into that final chicane and secured what was a sensational win.
Yeah, it really was very impressive, and certainly for Antoine, it was one of those situations where you come away with only half a second separating the top 4. Any one of them could have been able to claim that race victory, but it was the number 27 that gets that reward, and he's going to have to do it all again though today from the third row of the grid.
He braked late and managed to make his way through the chicane solidly in first position. There was a bit of a battle behind between Jurien van Krugten and Levin Pomara, and the big winner of that battle was this man Thias Wenzel, who on his debut in the Northern Talent Cup secured second position after a penalty for Jurien van Krugten, the number 36.
Yeah, starting this race from pole position as well, so it's been a really good start to his NTC tenure, and certainly for Wenzel, he's looked pretty comfortable and confident out there on the racetrack, always at the front of the field in yesterday's running, whether that was before the red flag or for the 5-lap shootout at the end.
Riders making their final checks before they head out for the warm-up lap in 4 minutes' time. Let's take you then through our front row of the grid. We saw a few moments ago, number 17, Thias Wenzel. He has arrived in position now on pole position in his very first Northern Talent Cup race. And Wenzel finished second eventually yesterday. He was 3 seconds clear of his rivals before the original red flag, and he was unable to open a similar gap at the restart. Let's see what he can do here in a 14-lap race.
Yeah, only 15 years of age, and starting off his time in the NTC exactly as you'd like, a pole position, ahead of his teammate, and a very strong start to the season.
Joining him on the front row of the grid is Kiefer Racing teammate Alessandro Binder, a fellow rookie in the class. A potential podium slipped away through his fingers in the final couple laps of race 1 as his pace dropped off. 6th position was nonetheless a decent return ahead of race 2.
Yeah, it really was, and Binder is a rider this weekend that really was able to always be at the front of the field. Ended up with that 6th place finish, like you said, Anthony, but he looked pretty combative all the way through.
Complete in the front row of the grid is Tobias Kitzbichler, 5th in yesterday's race 1. Number 38 continues his streak of top 10 finishes after debuting in last season's Hockenheim round as a wildcard, with a worst finish of 6th in 3 appearances. That consistency could pay off over a full season.
Yeah, one of the younger riders on the grid at only 14, and Kitzbichler, it's about trying to gain the experience from last year and put it to good use this year to be able to come away with good results, and top 5 finish yesterday. If he does that again today, it's a good start to the season.
Second row for Jurien van Krugten, the best qualified Dutch rider on this grid, and a rider who returned to form yesterday. It was a very difficult 2023 season for him, but he picked up his 5th podium in the Northern Talent Cup, 3 which have come at this TT Circuit Assen.
Yeah, and racing for the Bo Ben Schneider Academy as well, and Jurien has been the rider coming into this season that was the pre-season favourite and the guy with a lot of expectation on him.
The big loser of that final lap battle in race 1, Levin Pomara, went from attempting a move into 1st at the final chicane to 4th at the flag, but that was still his best result in the Northern Talent Cup since race 1 at Assen last year. The brother of 2023 runner-up Lennox Pomara, he will try to prove himself to be the adept rider that we've already seen him be in these sort of mixed conditions.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that it is a case of trying to emulate what your brother's been able to do, and Lennox, of course, racing in the Red Bull Rookies Cup this year, and you want to be able to try and have some success and try and progress.
An unfortunate debut yesterday for our youngest rider on the grid, Tom Rowland from Belgium. 14-year-old was riding inside the top 10 in the first race, but technical issues on the grid for the restart forced him to start from pit lane, ultimately finishing in 18th position. Here is the race. 1 winner yesterday, and your first championship leader of the season, Antoine Nativi, the number 27 from France. He shares that 3rd row of the grid with Ferre Flerakers, Dustin Schneider returning from the IDM Supersport 300 World Championship, Zelenak, Ermscher, Krabacher just behind them, Kovacs, Massili and Vince on the 5th row of the grid. A frantic 5-lap sprint in race 1 gave us a final lap 4-rider scrap for first position amidst mixed conditions. Race 2 is a different prospect entirely, with 14 laps of the 4.5-kilometre TT Circuit Assen awaiting the 22 rider field. After a weekend of no dry run in this race, is going to be absolutely no different. But it is going to be time to see if the pace setters from the pre-season can show their pace once again, or if in a weekend of surprises in the Netherlands, there's room for just one more. Stars of tomorrow ready to race today. This is the Northern Talent Cup. Anthony Nelson and Steve English live trackside from Assen. It's the same grid from yesterday. It's similar conditions to yesterday. Steve, what can we expect in this race?
Well, the conditions are the key, and the conditions have been the key for everything across this weekend. Obviously, for the Northern Talent Cup, they support the IDM. They also support us here in the World Superbike Paddock. And this weekend, every race has been blighted by some sort of weather issue, whether it's been rain coming down or track drying or certain circumstances playing to the fore. This race, though, it's a drying racetrack. This is where we'll get to see the riders adapt and evolve as the race goes on and just try and maintain the life in their wet weather tyres as well, because 14 laps of action with a drying track can be quite tricky for the Pirelli tyres.
Yesterday, the fastest laps were around about in the 155s, as well as the Super Pole laps that we had, the qualifying laps that we had on Friday. That's around about 6 seconds slower than what we would see, or we used to see in previous seasons at TT Circuit Assen on the dry track. So that will be an early indicator from lap 2 of where we're at in terms of track conditions. Yeah,
everyone's going to be out there in their wet tyres, it looked like, on the starting grid, and that means that for all of these riders, they've got 14 laps of trying to keep the tyres alive, because in a wet race they should run right through to the end without a stoppage. It's usually if there's dry race and then it starts to rain that we'll have a delay in these Talent Cups. The good news for all of these riders is, though, we've got the exact same bikes in the Northern Talent Cup as we have in the other Talent Cups, the British Talent Cup, the European Talent Cup, wherever you want to look, and that means that these riders have a chance to get some experience on the Honda, and then hopefully for some of them get the opportunity to race in one of the other Talent Cups later in the season as well. A lot of riders aim to get themselves a bit of a wild card at the European Talent Cup later in the year.
I mentioned yesterday that with the new Hondas, they are slightly smaller, slightly nimbler than the KTMs that we had at the past. Very quickly, Steve, can that be an advantage for some of the heavier riders who have, in these sort of conditions now, can these conditions be an advantage for some of the heavier riders who've struggled so far?
Yeah, there's not really a big advantage on a Talent Cup bike to be bigger or taller or heavier than any of your rivals, but with the Honda it does seem like it's a little bit more comfortable for them than it was on the KTM, so we'll wait and see if it makes a big difference in terms of the overall results. The one thing about it is a lot of these riders, 15 years of age, there's still a lot of growing for them to do, but growing up on the racetrack is the main thing here in the Talent Cup.
So riders arrived to the grid. It's a front row of rookies: Wenzel, Binder and Kitzbichler. Championship leader Natty V, first rider on row 3. We've got Van Krugten and Pomara on row 2. So all our championship contenders inside that top 7. We'll see if somebody can spring a surprise from the back. It's been a weekend of unpredictability here at the Cathedral of Speed. Green flag is at the back. I'll wait for the light to come on, but here they go. The lights go off, and race 2 of the Northern Talent Cup at the TT Circuit Assen is underway. And it was another great start from our riders on the front row of the grid. TS Wenzel in particular is already starting to open a gap with Alessandro Binder behind them. And once again, the 2 Kiefer Racing riders are ahead.
Yeah, good start for the Kiefer Racing bikes from the 4th position on the grid, though. Terrible start for Julian Van Krugten, it looked like. And he's all the way down the order. We'll wait and see where he comes through, but I think he dropped right to the back of the field.
On our timing screens, he is down in 21st position, and I do not think that is a mistake. What an awful start from the number 36, who was on the podium yesterday. I mentioned it was a return to form for him yesterday. Well, he's going to have his work cut out today to be able to prove that. Meanwhile, we've got our front row all in the top 3 positions, side by side as we go for the first time down the back straight. The best place to be able to get a slipstream around is TT Circuit Assen, and Kitzbichler moves up from 3rd position to 1st.
Yeah, a couple of good starts as well. Dustin Schneider managed to get himself up into an extra couple of positions from the 3rd row of the grid. He's now just into P8. Now he's lost a couple of spots, and then a little bit further down, that TV was able to get himself into the top 6, but needs to keep making that progress in the number 27.
Binder there, you seem to lose some time going around turns 7 and 8, just going around the wet part of the track. There is a very clear dry line. Oh, a big moment there for TS Wenzel. He will drop down to 3rd position, as I was mentioning. There seemed to be somewhat of a dry line at some part of the track, but that will be changing any instant, and there are a lot of dangerous places here right at this moment.
Yeah, Kitzbichler doing a really good job in the opening lap. He's opened up a gap of a second now. He's willing to push hard and try and open up a little bit of a margin. As you can see here, the number 28, that's Fleerackers down in 6th position, and there's a big gap behind him already.
Masli has also made an excellent start. The number 46 from Italy was 14th on the grid. He's up to 7th position. Van Krugten seems to have recovered some positions. He's back up to 13th, but he's got his work cut out for him now. He's around about 4 seconds back from our race leader Kitzbichler, who is 1.1 seconds clear, 1.3 as we cross the finish line now. So it's Kitzbichler, Binder and Wenzel, with Natty V, our championship leader, just behind them and fighting for the podium once again.
Yeah, good effort from the number 27 we saw yesterday. A very patient rider, and that might be the key in this race as well. You can see at the front of the field, Kitzbichler's open up a really big gap, but there's so much dry track out there as well right now.
Look at where the number 96 on Pratt was 19th on the grid. He's up to 9th position already, so a lot of change in these first laps of the race 2 of the Northern Talent Cup. The only place where the positions aren't particularly changing is at the front. Just Kitzbühel gaining those 2 positions over T.S. Wenzel, who was our pole sitter. And as you can see there, as they go down the back straight, he's up to 2 seconds, his advantage over Binder now.
But you can see there as well, the riders already looking for wet patches, damp patches on this racetrack, trying cool down those wet tyres, because they're already going to start to overheat in some of these drying areas of the racetrack.
As we've seen in races all weekend, it changes so much here, the conditions. We're going to see that
look
race
at Van Kruten there on the second row of the grid, just misses the start completely, can't get the bike going, it gets bogged right down, drops all the way down the order, and he's going to spend 14 laps now trying to recover from that. He's down there in 10th position right now.
Oh, we'll see that start properly there. Very well done from the riders behind to avoid Van Kruten, because that is a very perilous situation, stopping on the starting grid with the riders behind coming at full speed at that point. But he is now back into contention in this race. 10th position, he's 6 seconds behind our racer to Kitzbühel, but actually he's closed the gap with the riders ahead of him quite quickly in this lap, and it seems like he might actually have the pace to be able to contend. So here is that big battle, and there we do see Van Kruten trying to make his way past Krabacher for 9th position.
And change of position there for P2 as well. No, it looks like it's Binder. Yeah, he's dropped down into 3rd position there. So Wenzel able to come through in the number 17 machine, our pole setter. The gap now 3 seconds to the race leader. But the race leader's been the fastest rider in that lead group. But the fastest rider on the track is Jurien Van Kruten. And only slightly faster than the race leader, but a lot faster than everyone else.
Well, he's got nothing to lose at this point. He can see Kitzbühel going off in the distance, but T.S. Wenzel in 2nd position is very much within eyesight for our Dutch rider, our leading Dutch rider in race 1. Yes, I always said 3 podiums in his appearances out of his 5 podiums in total in the Northern Talent Cup. 3 of them came here at the TT Circuit Assen, and a podium is within reach after that terrible start that he had. He's still got a bit of a gap to bridge to number 53, Levin Pomara. One of the riders was fighting for the podium yesterday, but it is 6/10 of a second, 7/10 of a second between Van Kruten and Pomara, 6/10 of a second between Pomara and Ferre Flerakers inside the top 5 position for the number 28 of the rookie.
You can see there the number 28 of Flerakers. He's trying to find those wet patches out in the racetrack down the back straight. He's the only rider searching for them last time around. It may not give him a big benefit right now, but maybe later in the race that's going to help him. But look at how dry this section of the racetrack is.
The question is, how will these wet tyres now respond on a dry track? Because we see sometimes when we look in the superbike class with the Pirellis, the intermediates work very well. Those isn't really an option here.
Yeah, the wet tyre is going to react badly to a dry track like this. So the riders are going to be searching out any sort of damp patches they have. This place just dries so quickly. It surprises everyone, even though all weekend we've been saying the same thing.
So here we go. T.S. Wenzel also starting to open a gap with the riders behind him. It's up to half a second as we come through this final sector of the TT Circuit Assen. The fast and flowing S is there as we come across the left-hander of turn 15 and into the final chicane of the circuit. Ferre Flerakers looks for a move up the inside of Antoine Natalie for 3rd position, but he can't do it. So it's Kitzbühel, Wenzel, Natalie, Flerakers, Binder, your top 5. And Kitzbühel still has checked out. He's at 159. He's the only rider other than Van Kruten in 6th position who is into those 159s.
Yeah, Van Kruten just trying to make some progress as well now to get himself up into those top 5 positions. He got half a second to make up on Binder in front of him, so the orange flashes on the top of the fairing there, that's the number 36 trying to make his progress, and he is going to come through pretty quickly.
Question is, once he does get to the front of that group, if none of the riders in front of him impede him, if he will be able to close that gap with the number 38. There's still 11 laps to go, including this lap, so still a very long race distance in the Northern Talent Cup.
Flerakers there as well on the 28, running the wide way around the outside of turn 5, trying to keep his tyres in wet conditions, but there aren't that many wet patches out there in this racetrack right now.
Binder, after a great start, seems to be in a bit of trouble. He's going to be passed by Jurien Van Kruten. It won't be here around turn 7. It might be down the inside of turn 8. Jurien Van Kruten will attempt the move there. seems like it sticks. Local boy up to 5th position, and Binder losing places quickly.
Yeah, and for Binder, obviously front row starter, the goal now has to be just to try and make sure you're able to come away with a top 5 finish, top 6 finish, build on yesterday's performance where he finished in 6th position as well.
Here goes Van Krugten up inside of Fleurakers. We'll miss that because we go into a replay now here of Thias Wenzel and our riders in this battle for 2nd position. Van Krugten has consolidated that move up the inside of Fleurakers up to 4th position, and now just 1/10 of a second away from NTC, who himself is within touching distance of Thias Wenzel, who had seemed to open a gap, but he's lost that in the 2nd sector. And here we go. Here is that battle, which is now for 2nd position, and Van Krugten, the local hero, after a terrible start, is through.
Yeah, while we were watching that replay, we've seen Van Krugten come through all the way up into 2nd position, so he's gone from 6th position up to 2nd in the last half a lap.
So Van Krugten is in 2nd position, as I mentioned previously in that lap. The question now is, can he bridge the gap to Tobias Kitzbichler, our race leader? It's 6.5 seconds, a very long gap to bridge, but it's a very long way to go in this race. It's 4.5 kilometers around this TT Circuit Assen, so you can do the math yourself. 45 kilometers to go in this race if nothing impedes these riders. And the first partials and the first lap with Van Krugten in 2nd position will indicate whether we have our race on our hands. Krugten going around turn 5, you can see that progression from him, and lap 1 actually lap 1 start there of 11th actually flatters number 36 because he dropped right down to 21st position before we got to turn 1.
Yeah, and doing a great job to recover, put himself into position now to score 20 points, and with the podium yesterday as well, that is a good effort by him.
And Thias Wenzel, who a few moments ago was up to 2nd position, seems to have dropped now all the way down to 7th. So all of this infighting really affecting the Kiefer Racing brothers, the Kiefer Racing riders, 1st and 2nd on the grid. They're down now to 5th and 7th.
Yeah, and they've lost that momentum, as has Pomara as well, and we'll have to wait and see exactly what happened to them. But as it is, Van Krugten is the rider at the front of this group, but he's not making an impression on the race leader. The gap now out by another half second, so unless we see Kitzbichler really struggle with the tyres, but everyone's going to struggle with the tyres, this is his race to lose.
Well, that's the question with these wet tyres on a dry track, where usually tyre issue isn't an issue in the Northern Talent Cup. As we see, NTC and now Fleurakers has pushed past Van Krugten into 4th position, so the Dutch rider's pace has gone the moment that he hit the front. The question is, tyre life with these tyres on this track, could it potentially be an issue? Because Kitzbichler has pressed from the start. He's actually set the fastest lap of the race now, a 1:57. Antoine NTC is looking to rise behind it to see if they can bridge that gap. But Kitzbichler has gone away unless he has some sort of issues. He's over a second faster than riders behind him. It doesn't seem like that's going to be an issue as we progress with this race, but it is a big question mark as we head into the second half of this race with 9 laps to go.
Yeah, once these tyres overheat, there's no bringing them back because there's nowhere to really try and cool them. You can see here where the riders are. There's no real damp patches out in the racetrack. We're going to see if the 28 runs around the outside again, but again, there's nowhere that's wet, even on the outside of the track now. So there's a couple of damp patches here in the run down the Venstang, but not an awful lot of them. Definitely not enough to be able to cool down the tread pattern from those Pirelli tyres, because once they overheat, that tread pattern and the blocks just start to move around underneath you and they take away all your confidence.
And Krugten has hit the front for this battle for 2nd position once again, but all of this infighting has just helped in Tobias Kitzbichler's case if it hadn't done so already. The gap is up to 8.4 seconds now, and these 3 riders actually have opened a gap now to the riders in 5th, 6th and 7th. Alessandro Binder, as you can see, a solitary ride for him at the minute in 5th position. He's 2.2 seconds back from Fleurakers. He's around about a second ahead of Levin Pomara, who isn't quite able to keep up the pace. All of these riders have been setting their personal best lap times on this drying track, so everything's still holding up at the minute as Van Krugten tries to open a small gap through the final sector here, this TT Circuit Assen. But this is the sector of the track where you see those gaps getting eaten up the most. These riders now are able to capture the slipstream through these S's, and as you can see, what was a 3/10 of a second gap has now become a 0.1 of a second gap.
Yeah, once you're able to use that slipstream, you are able just to claw back any margin that's been lost, or you're able to give yourself the chance to overtake on the run down in towards that chicane at the end of the lap.
Here we go, 8 laps to go as we cross the finish line, and we still see this battle for second. Best personal lap of the race for Jurien van Kruchten, a 1:58.0. It's half a second faster than Antoine Nativi. We go back for a moment to the battle for fifth, and Pomara's eaten up that gap that he had with Alessandro Binder behind. It is now down to a tenth of a second, and Pomara should be able to make a move over the number 85, a second Kiefer Racing rider. Behind them, there's this battle for 8th position between Ampran, the rookie. Dustin Schneider returned to the championship, to the cup, and not really able to make an impression so far. He was third in the Northern Talent Cup back in 2022. He's a race winner here at Assen, but really struggling in these mixed conditions, and he'll come under attack from our rookie Tom Ronan, number 2, and Matteo Massi, number 46, in short order. Meanwhile, we turn back to our battle for second, and Van Kruchten now able to open a small gap of 4/10 of a second over Nativi, who himself has a 4/10 of a second gap over Flair Rackers. So these positions starting to stabilise somewhat.
This is back to our race leader, Kitzblicker, and you can see the number 38 making his way around the end of the lap here. And certainly at this stage of the race, it's his race to lose. But 8.5 seconds, how much are you taking out of your tyres compared to everyone else? Obviously, in conditions like this, everyone's taking out a lot of the life from their tyres. But for Kitzblicker, he's still pushing on, and a 1:57 last time around. So the track conditions, if you were out there on slick tyres, you'd be able to lap very fast, but all of the Northern Talent Cup riders have to be out there on the same tyres as each other, and it certainly means that everyone's having to ride very different races than they would normally do. You don't have the bike underneath you to be aggressive and just to throw the bike into the corners, but you have to try and think about, we're only halfway through this race, and it's about surviving until the end.
Another lap comes down, and another fastest lap for race leader Tobias Kitzblicker. He's down into 1:56s. It's 1:56.990 for the number 38, and that still is around about half a second faster than Jurien van Kruchten in second. That gap still increasing up to around about 9 seconds now for Tobias Kitzblicker, who hasn't won a race in the Northern Talent Cup. Remember, he is technically a rookie. He did a wild card last season, the final round of the season, came in, finished 6th and 2nd in the 2 races there, just missed off on a first race win by a few thousandths of a second, but it seems like that can't surely be the case here. He's up to 9 seconds ahead of Van Kruchten, and Kitzblicker on course for an incredible race win. Up
to 9 seconds and half a second a lap faster than everyone else as well, so he's doing exactly what he needs to do at the front of this field, and that's a sign of maturity as well from Kitzblicker, and Toby's doing a very good job in the number 38 machine. It's a lonely race out in front, but you'll take that for the 25 points.
Not to tempt fate, but the only thing that really could harm his chances of race win now is something that happened yesterday, which was, in that case, a red flag and an interruption before we reach the 2/3 race distance. So crossing fingers that we don't have a situation like that today. We continue with our battle for fifth. Binder and Pomara fighting for several laps. Pomara bridged the gap with Binder in a couple of sectors, but hasn't been quite able to pass the number 85, and it seems like he's struggling to follow the pace of the Kiefer Racing rider, who's consolidating that 5th position. His teammate T.S. Wenzel is still down in 17th. A very solitary race for him because he's 2.4 seconds behind these riders. He's around about 7.5 seconds ahead of those riders in the battle for 8th. This is how the championship would look as we see Antoine Nativi attempt a move over Jurien van Kruchten. These haven't switched positions the last couple of laps, really following each other and keeping their ammo cool, let's say, for the time being.
Yeah, and you can see there a little bit of a cloud coming in, and that cloud's actually a little bit dark as well. I think that these Northern Talent Cup riders, I don't know if you'd be praying for the rain at this stage, because the Pirelli tyres have been put through the mill, so how much tread would you still have left on them if it started to rain again? But certainly they're looking for something that's going to give them a chance. The wind has really picked up now. That's what could have a big impact here in the closing stage of this race.
Notice this coming to the commentary booth earlier on that the wind had really picked up at the end of the Supersport race, which was around about 45 minutes ago, and it seems it hasn't stopped now. So if the rain and the wind start to come in strong, well, that is one thing that could change the conditions on this race. But with a 10.3 second gap, you have to think that Kitzblicker will be quite confident with the riders behind him as he sets another fast lap of this race, a 1:56.9.
Yeah, and for Kitzblicker at the front of the field, certainly it's a lonely race, and he looks like he's certainly going to have this one pretty comfortably, but for the rest of the field, the wind could have a bit of an impact on them. Van Krooten could well come under attack from Nativi in the closing stage of this race, but the big one to keep an eye on as well is Fleerackers on the number 28 machine. Can he bring himself back into podium contention? On this lap so far, he's picked up a quarter of a second on the riders in front of him. He doesn't need to pick up that much more. That's him in the back of the shot on the black bike with the grey leathers, and he's closed right up.
And Fleerack is one of the riders who has experience on Pirelli tyres, actually, after racing the IDM Supersport 300 Championship the last couple of seasons. He finished 7th in the championship yesterday on last year on a Kawasaki, and we'll see if that experience can come to play now in a longer race.
Yeah, and it's certainly coming in useful for him right now. He's going to move himself into the podium spots.
There we go, Fleerackers has bridged that gap to the two riders in front and moves ahead of our championship leader Antoine Nativi, and Jurien Van Krooten going to come under really increased pressure from the number 28.
Yeah, and for Van Krooten on the number 36 machine, obviously dropped down to 21st position at the start of this race. There's now a bit of a scrap going on behind him. Nativi's been able to get himself back onto the podium, and for the number 36 of Van Krooten, though, this is critical for him. He came into this season as one of the favourites. He was able to do a good job yesterday to come away with a podium. Having made such a dreadful start, if he's able to still give himself the chance of being able to pick up 20 points per second, he needs to do that.
Fleerackers was a second faster than Van Krooten and Nativi in the last lap, but now it seems that his pace is somewhat stalled once he's reached those riders. So we'll see if on the back straight he can make a move. That's probably the best place to do it at this time, and it seems like he has moved ahead of Nativi. Although here they seem to be switching positions all the time, and that's given Van Krooten an opportunity to open a small gap and potentially consolidate that second position.
Yeah, and that's what Jurien Van Krooten needs to do on the 36 to be able to open up a little bit of a margin. But certainly Fleerackers right now, this is probably going to be a chance for him to come through into third position here, and tries to run around the outside. It's a brave man to make that move, and he's able to make it there, but then he gets attacked on the run down the Vengelang straight as well. So important to be able to put yourself into those positions to know what you have to do.
And that's the thing, if you make a move at turn 5, you've got the long back straight here at the TT Circuit Assen after you, and basically you're just at sit and duck for the riders behind you, especially on these sort of bikes where the slipstream is so important. We come through the final sector of this track. We will have 4 laps to go when they cross the finish line. And Fleerackers will try another move down the inside turn 16. Can't quite stick it this time over Nativi, but he will have the start finish straight to try and attempt to move over the Frenchman and move into third position. Jurien Van Krooten doing a solid job keeping that second position. All of these 3 riders, very similar lap times, and actually for the first time in this race they were faster than Kitzbühel by around about half a second. The gap has decreased to 9.7 seconds. So Fleerackers unable to make that move over the riders ahead of him. And right now, actually, very different times for all the riders in this class, as some of the conditions seem to stabilize. Levin Pomara with some issues on that last lap. He lost around about 3 seconds to Alessandro Binder in that battle for 5th.
Yeah, and for all of these riders now, they know that you're down into the last 3.5 laps, and the gap from Van Krooten to the race leader, it's 9.5 seconds, so pulling back half a second a lap, not nearly enough for them, but it is where you give yourself the chance to maybe stretch out a little bit from the riders behind you.
I've noticed a couple of times as we've come out of turn 5 and going on to that start-finish to that back straight, Van Krooten lifting himself off of the bike and getting into position there. What can the number 36 be trying to do there? Could it be a signal of an issue or something that he's trying to do with the bike?
I think he's just trying to put himself into more of an aerodynamic tuck and give himself that extra little bit of speed down that back straight. We'll have another look at it the next time around, but I'd imagine that's what he's doing.
Working well for the time being because he's keeping that gap stable over the riders behind, although this is an area of the track where the 2 riders behind him, the number 27 Antoine Nativi and number 28 Fleerackers, can get somewhat of an advantage. And as I said, that Antoine Nativi is right on the back of the number 36, and he'll be in a position to attack coming into the final chicane. Fleerackers thinks about a move around the inside of turn 15, can't stick it there, and the positions will remain stable as we come through this chicane one more time with 3 laps to go. And Tobias Kitzbichler has set another fastest lap of the race, a 156.8, and Van Krugten takes it away from me with 156.5. So these riders, again, slightly faster than our race leader at this time of the race.
Yeah, they've got tyre underneath them and they've got 3 laps to go. You use what you got and just give it everything you have to try and finish this race off. And for Van Krugten, for Nativi, for Fleerackers, all of them faster than the race leader, but all of them very closely matched to one another. Jurriën Van Krugten here on the number 36 machine. He's at the front of this group. He's not put a foot wrong in this race since the start, but he had to recover from 21st position, so you have to say he's ridden a really good race to get to this point.
Behind these riders, there's a very big battle for 8th position with number 96 on plan, who's starting 19th on the grid. He's just gotten overtaken, actually, by Richard Ermshaw, one of our crashes from yesterday, number 95. But you've got around about 4 different riders trying to get into position and get a top 10 finish. It's Ermshaw, Ampras, Schneider and Roland in that battle for 8th. Positions ahead of them somewhat stabilised with Binder, Pomara and Wenzel from 5th to 7th, all with big gaps between them. And this is at the moment the biggest battle that we have between the riders at the front, Van Krugten, Nativi and Fleerackers, with 2.5 laps to go.
Yeah, 2.5 laps to go, and none of them, other than for a couple of laps of Fleerackers, have really looked like making a move on one another. So it is a case of trying to see now with 2 laps to go whether or not anyone's going to put themselves into that position to try and take a stab.
Fleerackers is the one rider out of these 3 that are currently in the provisional podium positions that doesn't actually have a podium in the Northern Talent Cup. So you can certainly he'll be that slightly bit more eager to try and get in a battle when the time does come. It's going to be 2 laps to go as these riders cross the finish line. Tobias Kitzbichler has already crossed. It was a 9.2 second lead as we cross the finish line. It's now down to 8.8, fastest laps of the race from all of these 3 riders.
All 3 of them, and each of them faster than the other. So for Fleerackers, once again, he's the rider that's got just a little bit more performance than the other riders, but does he have enough to be able to make a move? Turn 5 is the key overtaking opportunity.
Well, on the previous lap, he tried to move around turn 5 again, wasn't able to consolidate it. The key will be to see if he can get something of an advantage on the back straight. This is your battle for 8th. As you can see, 4 riders all basically in the same corner of the track, trying to get some points on the board. And Emprunt is the leader of that battle, the number 96. The second Frenchman on the grid, you've got Nativi in 3rd position, Emprunt in 8th position. They've all come up from the junior series in France and doing a solid job today.
Yeah, and good battle going on there for that 8th position. Very similar to the battle for 2nd position as well. And obviously 2nd, 3rd and 4th, you can put a blanket over them, only 0.3 of a second between Van Krugten, Nativi and Fleerackers. And sure, when we get back to that, we'll be able to see 3 riders trying to give themselves the chance of standing on the podium here in the 2nd race of the Northern Talent Cup season.
Dustin Schneider at the back of this group, and he makes a move now to move into the top 10, but certainly not the weekend number 20 will have expected, and anybody expected. He came into these series finishing 3rd in the IDM Supersport 300 Championship, and this weekend just hasn't gone to plan for the number 20, who finished 3rd in this series in 2022. So Tobias Kitzbichler, our race leader, crossing the finish line the start of this final lap of the race. And these riders in this battle for 2nd, they've been battling all race long. There's small gaps between them, but not enough. We will have a battle for the podium positions in this final lap of the race. And Jurriën Van Krugten immediately sets the fastest lap of this race, a 1:55.7. We're down to the same lap times that we had yesterday, and this race for 2nd is on.
Yeah, and look at Fleerackers, though, much closer now, much faster mid-corner to try and set something up. Nativi goes a little bit defensive there. Is that going to leave him vulnerable to the exit speed now for the number 28? Looks like Fleerackers trying to put himself in position.
Fleerackers, will he attempt around the outside as he did a few laps ago? No, he doesn't. He's going to be behind Nativi as they go on to the back straight. But Jurriën Van Krugten did have a 0.2 of a second gap over Antoine Nativi. This is again the battle for 8th, but they're down the start-finish straight in that battle for 2nd. Van Krugten still leads ahead of Antoine Nativi, and Flerac is losing some time as they came around turn 5 there.
Yeah, switching back between these battles, and this is the battle for the podium. And the number 36, Jurien Van Krugten, he dropped all the way down the field off the start. He's recovered from 21st up to second position, and he's not out of reach yet for Nativi, but he's close to that. Nativi on the number 27, race winner yesterday, needs to be perfect for the last half a lap.
Nativi was absolutely a demon on the brakes yesterday to defend his first race win in the class. Can he do the same thing through the final sector to consolidate a podium and remain as a championship leader with a bigger gap over Van Krugten? Well, we enter the final sector. Our race leader is around turn 15. We'll be entering the final chicane. You see him here, the number 38. We've barely seen him all race, but that's just because he's done such an excellent job to have a 7-second gap over the riders in the battle for second. Tobias Kitzbichler, the number 38, the rookie, wins his first race in the Northern Talent Cup. And in this battle for second, Jurien Van Krugten remains in second position with Antoine Nativi in third. And Ferre Flarakas, despite the pace that he had in that middle stage of the race, unable to beat the riders ahead of him, he remains fourth. Alessandro Binder, number 85 for Keystone Racing, getting his first top 5 finish in the class. Here is Levin Pomara in 6th position. Solitary rise for both of them. It will be Tias Wenzel in 7th position, our pole sitter, and that battle for 8th position rages on. Here you see them 4 abreast nearly as they come across the finish line, and who will make it first? Oh, they nearly touch as they went off the finish line. I don't think they even know the race is finished. Here we go. It was Richard Ermscher in 8th position, so he wins that battle with Owen in 9th, Dustin Schneider in 10th, and Tom Rowling, the biggest loser of that battle, in 11th. Action all the way across the grid in the Northern Talent Cup.
Yeah, super stuff, and a super ride here from Kitzblicker as well. Tobias was really strong all the way through that race. Did well yesterday as well with a top 5 finish, but it's all about the 25 points here for the race win.
Tobias Kitzbichler, he came into the series this season from the Mini GP World Series. He was in the World Series Super Finale last season, but it's a big jump to make for any rider. He's also the 4th youngest rider on this grid, one of the riders from the 2009 class coming to the series for the first time. But he will be absolutely elated.
Yeah, it's a real moment to remember for Kitzblicker, especially because he was the rider that was able to have that confidence at the start of the race to be able to take off and win this one. We have to say as well, for the wet weather Pirelli tyres, this was an impressive performance to be able to hold up under these conditions, because we had a dry track pretty much for the whole race, and still the wet weather tyres were able to give riders good consistent pace all the way through the race.
Jurien Van Krugten in 2nd position. This is actually the first time that he scores 2 podiums in one single round. So I mentioned at the start of the program, he's really proven that he is back to form and to being a championship contender here. Still missing that race win, but with 2 podiums here at the TT Circuit Assen, bringing his total tally up to 6 in the series, you have to think that that first podium is next to come.
Yeah, that first win really has to be the target for Van Krugten, and he's a rider that has been able to make a big step forward. It came in with a lot of expectation, one of the pre-season favourites, and now able to show over the course of both of these races this weekend just what you can expect from him.
With Antoine Nativi in 3rd, he remains the championship leader with a 5-point advantage over Kitzbichler and Van Krugten. So a solid job from the Frenchman. He picks up 2 podiums also for the first time in one weekend, added today's 3rd to yesterday's race win. And Ferre Flarac, as we mentioned, the big loser out to that battle at 4nd. It is still a frankly excellent job from the number 28 to be in that sort of position as well as a rookie.
Yeah, really is, and very impressive stuff from Flerackers, and a really good ride too, to be able to put himself back into contention all the way through that race.
So here we go. Our riders coming into Parc Fermé for one final time this weekend at the TT Circuit Assen. It has been a superb and absolutely phenomenal weekend full of unpredictability across all 5 classes that we've had here, and both days finishing off with truly exciting Northern Talent Cup races. These riders now will have not too much rest. We're back racing in just a couple of weeks' time at the Saxon Ring. We have 2 visits to the Saxon Ring this season. We also have a 2nd visit to the TT Circuit Assen alongside the IBM Championship in a few weeks, a few months' time. So something to look forward to for these riders. potentially to look forward to a dry race at last at the TT circuit, Assen. We certainly will be looking forward to the races, whatever the conditions that we have here in the Netherlands. Quick word on some of the riders further down the field. We had Matteo Massi, number 46, who had a great start to the race, but dropped back a bit in the latter stages. He finishes in 12th position. Anakin Zelenak, who yesterday was competing for the podium before crashing out at turn 10, the number 55, he finishes in 13th. And further down, we've got Valdemar Melgren and Ben Wigner closing out the points. Two rookies on this Northern Talent Cup grid, two of many rookies that we have in this field. Outside of the points, Martin Vincent, Daniel Kravacker, Zoltan Kovacs, Lorenzo Pontillo, Tom Coyle, Alexander Weissel and David Sidorov. Here are those full results. David Sidorov, by the way, returning from injury this weekend. He suffered a pre-season crash and injury ahead of the 2023 season. He was back competing this weekend for the first time, so good to see him on the grid and getting that experience under his belt. As I mentioned, here are the full results from that race. Huge gaps across the field. This sort of conditions is the sort of great equalizer in any sort of motorcycling competition. Northern Talent Cup on these Honda 250 bikes is no different. Just under 27 minutes and a half our time from the race winner. And this is how the championship looks after one round. It's Antoine Nativi in first position with his 2 podiums, ahead of Tobias Kitzbichler and Jurien van Krugten, both 5 points behind, but small gaps so far, with Thias Wenzel in 4th, 11 Pomara completing our top 5. Further down the field, you can see a few of our rookies. Ferrer Flerakers, Alessandro Binder down in 6th and 7th. Sam Emprin as well with that performance in race 2, moving up to 10th in the standings. And Richard Ermshire as well getting some points on the board after crashing out yesterday. The riders will be led now to the podium to celebrate one last time at the TT circuit in Assen in what has been a truly extraordinary weekend in all 5 classes.
Yeah, under more blue sky there than we've had for most of the weekend, really. And for Jurien van Krugten there, good to be able to come away with those 20 points and 2nd position in this race. Very solid effort by him, considering that he dropped all the way down the order off the start and then able to come away with 2nd position there. And not really attacked an awful lot during that race, so he rode well defensively to keep himself in front of the riders chasing him down, because Nativi and Fleerackers were both very fast during that race.
So wait for the riders to climb up to the podium. Here's the first one, Antoine Nativi onto that 3rd step of the rostrum. Jurien van Krugten up to 2nd. 2 riders who were on the rostrum yesterday. The big change is this man, Tobias Kitzbichler, getting his first win in the Northern Talent Cup, and a deserved one at that. With sportsmanship amongst all of these riders, they spend a lot of time together, they train together, they get advice from the rider coaches together as well as one big family.
Second place trophy and the 20
trophies presented to the riders. First trophies of their career for most of them. So something really to treasure, and getting them from support staff at Motul. Motul also a big change coming to the championship this year as well, alongside the technical changes that we've mentioned so far with the Honda bikes and the Pirelli tyres.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, please, your respect for
and here is the national anthem of our race winner, Tobias Kitzbichler.
of Austria. Congratulations to the top three. If we can ask the three.
Huge congratulations to our top three for the race today. An entertaining race at that, particularly with that battle for fourth, which also included Ferret Flairakas, not featured on the podium, but certainly deserved of some plaudits himself.
Before we have a chat to them on the podium, make some noise then for Antoine.
The next challenge for these riders awaits in less than 2 weeks' time, with the first of 4 visits to Germany this 2024 season. The Sachsenring will host 2 rounds this year, one in July alongside the MotoGP paddock, and round 2 accompanying the German Superbike Championship from the 3rd to the 5th of May. Join us then.